Your brain does not understand light. It does not understand sound. It does not understand pressure, temperature, or the smell of something burning. The only language your brain speaks, and I mean the only one, is electricity. Tiny electrical impulses are firing between neurons. Now here's where things get interesting. How does the outside world get in? How does the sunset become something you can see? How does a voice become something you can hear? How does the heat from your coffee become something you can feel in your hands? There is a translation process happening inside your body right now, one most people have never heard of. And on top of that, your brain has a very specific set of rules about what it even lets through. Those rules explain more about your daily experience than you might ever expect. And they explain exactly what happened to Frank. Welcome back to the Psychology Notebook. I'm Desiree, and this is Psych 101, the series where we build a real foundation in psychology, one concept at a time. If you've been following along, then you already know Frank. He is our beloved forest wanderer and a Sasquatch. Lately, he's been investigating mysterious damage near the beaver settlement. In the last video, we explored the difference between sensation and perception. Frank's senses are sharp. He's been picking up plenty of information from the forest. But before any of that reaches his awareness, his brain has already been shaping what he actually experiences. So today, we're going one level deeper. Before Frank's brain can edit anything, before perception can happen at all, the outside world has to get into his brain first. And the way that happens, and the rules that determine what gets through, are exactly what we're covering right now. We're talking about transduction, absolute thresholds, difference thresholds, and Weber's law. And if those terms sound overwhelming, take a deep breath and relax. We're going to break it down and make it make sense. Let's get into it. So, how does sensory information actually get from the world into your brain? Because it does not just teleport. It comes through your sensory receptors. They are specialized cells in your eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue that detect stimulation from the environment. But here's the problem. Your brain doesn't speak the language of light waves. It doesn't understand sound vibrations or pressure or chemicals. Your brain only processes one thing: electrical signals. So there has to be a translation. That process is called transduction. Let me walk you through how this works with vision. A photon of light enters your eye and hits your retina. That's the layer of light-sensitive cells at the back of your eyeball. Those retinal cells, specifically the rods and cones, absorb the light energy and convert it into an electrical signal called an action potential. That signal travels through your optic nerve all the way to your visual cortex at the back of your brain. And that is the first moment your brain has any idea that light exists. Here is a real-world way to think about this. Imagine you only speak English and someone hands you a letter written in Mandarin. The information is right there on the page, but you cannot use it. You need a translator. Transduction is that translator. It takes the formats your brain can't read, like light, sound, pressure, and chemicals, and converts everything into one format it understands: electrical signals. Transduction is that translator. It takes the formats your brain can't read, like light, sound, pressure, and chemicals, and converts everything into one format it understands: electrical signals. Here's something to hold on to. By the time a stimulus becomes a conscious experience, it has already been processed, filtered, and interpreted. You are never getting a raw feed of reality. You are always getting an edited version. Every single sensation you've ever had started here. The world became a signal, and that signal became an experience. One more thing worth knowing: the intensity of a stimulus is encoded in the rate of those electrical signals, meaning that a louder sound or a brighter light doesn't create different types of action potential. Rather, it creates more action potentials per second. Your brain knows the difference between a tap on the shoulder and a punch because of how fast those signals arrive, not what they're made of. Psychologists call this rate coding, and it's how the same neural language encodes every degree of intensity you've ever experienced. So transduction gets the signal to your brain, but does every signal make it to conscious awareness? No. Your brain has limits, and those limits are called thresholds. The absolute threshold is the minimum amount of stimulus energy required for you to detect something 50% of the time. Below that threshold, a stimulus might be physically present in the environment, but your sensory system won't register it. As far as your conscious experience is concerned, it doesn't exist. And here's why psychologists say 50% instead of 100. Your brain is not a machine. How tired you are, how focused you are, and what you're expecting to find, all of it shifts the thresholds slightly up and down. So 50% is the most honest way to define it. At baseline, your senses are remarkably precise. Here are some classic examples. Let's start with vision. On a perfectly clear, dark night, the human eye can detect a single candle flame from roughly 30 miles away. Hearing. Under completely quiet conditions, you can hear a watch tick from 20 feet away. Now think about smell. If there was a perfume diffused between 3 connected rooms, your nose would definitely catch it. Now to touch. Think about a bee's wing. If it dropped 1 centimeter onto your cheek, you would definitely feel that touch. And taste. If 1 teaspoon of sugar dissolved into 2 full gallons of water, your taste buds would definitely detect the sweetness. Your sensory systems are highly sensitive when conditions are right. In other words, the absolute threshold is the line below which a stimulus is, for all practical purposes, invisible to you. Now, the absolute threshold tells you whether a stimulus exists at all. But here's a completely different question. How much does something have to change before you actually notice the change? That's the difference threshold, also called the just noticeable difference, or JND. Simple example. You're in a car listening to music. Someone reaches over and turns up the volume by 1 tiny notch. Did you notice? Maybe, maybe not. That boundary, the smallest increase you could actually detect, is your just noticeable difference for volume in that moment. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because in the 1800s, a physiologist named Ernest Weber discovered something about the JND that changed how we understand sensation. Weber found that the just noticeable difference is not a fixed amount. It is always a proportional amount, like a fixed fraction of whatever the original stimulus already was. In plain English, Weber's law states this: the stronger, louder, or heavier something actually is, the more it has to change before your brain flags it as different. Let me give you 3 examples that will make this stick. Imagine holding a 5-pound weight. Someone adds 1 pound. You feel it immediately. That's a 20% increase. Now imagine you're holding 50 pounds and someone adds the same 1 pound. You probably won't feel a thing. That's only 2%. To actually notice a change at 50 pounds, you might need 5 or 10 pounds added. It was necessary to scale the change with the original. Example 2. You're in a quiet library and someone whispers. You hear it instantly. If you're at a loud concert and somebody whispers the exact same thing, it completely disappears in the noise. The whisper didn't change, the baseline changed. And Weber's law explains exactly why the same stimulus can be obvious in one context and non-existent in another. This one is going to change how you think about shopping. If a soda goes from $1 to $3, you definitely notice. That feels significant. But if a laptop goes from $397 to $399, you barely register it. The actual change is $2 either way. But $2 is a huge proportion of $1. $2 is almost nothing compared to $400. Your brain compares the ratio, not the number. And companies know this. Small proportional price increases fall below the JND on purpose. You don't even notice, so you pay anyway. That's Weber's law used against you at the cash register. And this proportional sensitivity, also known as Weber's constant, varies by sense. For example, your ear is remarkably sensitive to pitch. A change of less than 0.5% is detectable. Volume takes about 5%. Brightness around 8%. Each sense has its own built-in tolerance for change, which is why your senses aren't equally alert to everything shifting around you. Now, let's bring this back to Frank. The early signs of tree damage in the forest were real. Bark stripped here, gnaw marks there. The stimulation was above the absolute threshold, even in isolation. If Frank had looked at just those marks on a blank table, he would have noticed them immediately. But Frank was looking at those marks in isolation. He was looking at them against the richest possible baseline, an entire forest he monitored for years. Dense, layered, complex information in every direction. Weber's law states that when the baseline is already strong, a change must be proportionately larger to cross the difference threshold. The damage was present, but in the context Frank was operating in, it wasn't different enough from everything else for his brain to actually flag it. And here's what I want you to remember for the next lesson. Everything we covered today is only part of the story, because there's another mechanism at work. One that explains why walking the same trail at the same time every day actually makes you worse at noticing new things over time. And it's not because your sense is weakened, but because your brain starts filtering them out entirely. And that's what we're going to discuss in Lesson 12. But we're not done yet. I have a simple experiment for you to try tonight. Sit in a quiet room and slowly turn up the volume on your phone from 0. Notice the exact moment you first hear anything. That's your absolute threshold for that sound. Then play music at a comfortable volume and try increasing it by the smallest amount you can detect. When you do that, you would have just measured both in under a minute, and Weber would be proud. Now let's do a quick check-in with Frank before we wrap up the lesson. Frank is still out in the forest. He now understands why those early signs of damage almost slipped past him. But knowing about thresholds and Weber's law is only half the picture. Because here's the thing, even stimuli that are well above your threshold can eventually become invisible, not because your senses stopped working, but because your brain actively learns to ignore them. That's sensory adaptation. And in video 12, it's one of those concepts that once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your daily commute, your relationships, and even your own emotional responses. If you don't want to wait until Lesson 12, you can always download the Psych 101 Visual Flashcard Pack featuring 318 psychology terms and get a crash course in Psych 101 instantly. The links are down below. If today's video helped you understand how your senses actually work, you know what to do. Smash that like button and subscribe. Join us on our mission to make psychology education accessible to everyone. And drop a comment below and let me know where you're learning from. Now, according to YouTube, this video is the best for you on your psychoeducation journey. Click it and I'll see you over there.